This week, we welcome Dr. David Starobinski, professor at Boston University, to discuss network communications in the world of IoT. In the Leadership and Communications section, tech isn't the problem or solution for better productivity. Instead, look to your own leadership. 9 quotes by NBA legend Kobe Bryant that might impact our lives forever. How to build trust with business partners from other cultures and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Cybersecurity isn't only about stopping the threats you see, it's about stopping the ones you can't see. That's why Microsoft Security employs over 3,500 cybercrime experts and uses AI to help anticipate, identify, and eliminate threats. So you can focus on growing your business, and Microsoft Security can focus on protecting it. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Microsoft Security. With over half of enterprise security budgets going towards detection and response in 2020, the challenge is investing in solutions that can scale, migrate, and adapt with your business. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to help your team respond to threats across the hybrid attack surface. Everywhere your enterprise exists today and wherever it goes tomorrow, ExtraHop is there to secure it. Learn more at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 161, recorded February 3rd, 2020. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado, getting ready for a snowstorm. Joining me remotely from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island are my co-hosts, Mr. Paul Asadorian and Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt, it's good to be here. I guess Matt? It's the one of the last shows for a while where we get to talk about football.
Yeah,
and the outcome.
It's Football Hangover Monday.
Right?
Yep.
It's sad. I mean, I'm sad when it's not going to be till like August, right?
I know it's
tough.
tough.
We get football.
It's tough, but it was nice to wait. It was nice to have a Super Bowl where you're not sitting on the edge of your seat stressing out for your team.
It's true. It's very true.
Yeah, but I think the hand was tipped, right? Brady's coming back. There's no like big drama in Boston.
He loves Hulu.
That Hulu commercial is awesome. And he was on the field before in Belichick too, right? Before the game.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think all is well in New England for next season. You're all good.
We'll be good.
I have a lot of work to do in Denver and in Cleveland if I'm ever going to get back to it.
Got a lot of work to do in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th to April 1st, 2020 at the Disney Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the InfoSec World Main Conference or World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW2020 and click the register button to register with our discount code. We will also be recording at InfoSec World, so you can visit that same landing page to book your micro interview. All right, let's get to our guest interview. Dr. David Starobinski is professor of electrical and computer engineering and of systems engineering at Boston University. His research interests are in computer networking and security, and he has published over 100 peer-reviewed papers. Dr. Starobinski received a U.S. National Science Foundation Career Award and a U.S. Department of Energy Early Career Award for his work on quality of service engineering and network modeling. He is currently on the editorial board of the IEEE Open Journal and of the Communication Society, and was on the editorial boards of the IEEE Transactions on Information Forensics and Security. David, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you. Great joining you.
So before we get into kind of network communications in this new world of IoT, give some people a little background. We've got a lot of resources on some of the things that you've published, but give us a little history of some of the research that you've done up till this point, and then we'll get into some of the fun around software-defined radios and some of the other network communication stuff.
Yes, so indeed my early career was mostly focused on communications and quality of service, wireless communications and networking, physical layer, link access layer, cellular, Wi-Fi, all of those things. And clearly, over the years, what has emerged as the major issues in this area is security. So we know better build those networks, provide better quality of service, but yet the security, there are a host of challenges that we need to address. So my research is really now currently at the interface between engineering, business, management, and security. And that's what I'm mostly interested in. In terms of looking at wireless communications, we are really trying to look at all the aspects, of what we call the CIA triad, meaning the confidentiality, that's the C, the integrity of the communication, and most importantly, the availability. So the ability to sustain attacks, denial of service attacks. And so that's what I've really done over the past few years, looking quite carefully at the vulnerability of wireless networks to such denial of service attacks on the communication infrastructure. And so here, I'm not necessarily looking at a single device or even a single business, but really a large area, say an entire city. And so this is something more systemic. That's really what we've been concerned about. And we have done research trying to find out whether you may launch some large-scale attacks which may have domino effects, similar to smart grid failures. So
yeah, don't give Russia any more ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I think that the large-scale wireless attacks, if I'm understanding history correct, largely stems from just congestion issues, not necessarily an outside attacker. However, when reading the book Sandworm by Andy Greenberg, right, and he talks about the attacks from Russia against Ukraine. And what I found multiple things interesting, but one of it was they did go after the telecommunications, but more from a systems perspective, not from a wireless perspective. And I think as those systems get hardened in a lot of scenarios in nation-state attacks, that it's going to transfer into wireless and into IoT, which it already does, but attacking the systems is what gives them a foothold.
Yes, perfectly right. And there are certainly many different angles or direction where you can attack the system. You can attack the software that is managing the system, or you can attack the wireless links themselves. But what is emerging over the past few years is that there is increasingly coupling between different technologies that if, say, you congest one area, that may have some knock-on effect on other areas. That's what we have been looking at.
What I found interesting is the combination of attacks is kind of what you're alluding to, right? And what I never knew and found fascinating and just so evil is not only did they hack into the power grid and start turning the power off, but they also turned the lights off and the power to the control system, to the control room. Yeah. So the control room went dark to make it more difficult for folks to recover, as well as wiping the systems in the control room. And it was a very staged and coordinated attack that not just attacked systems, not just attacked PLCs, but also they figured out that this is how we turn the power off to the control room. And I think we're going to see similar things when we look at the wireless communications and how they're used in all of these different kind of use cases, is that combination of attacks.
Sure.
Yes.
Halt the recovery time, right? Stall the recovery time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, indeed, the infrastructures are increasingly coupled one with another. So you have the electricity, the communication, and maybe soon in the future, transportation, smart cities, connected vehicles. So this is also another area, where one attack on one infrastructure can then be used to launch an attack on another one.
Yeah, because I think a lot of what we've seen in terms of attacking, specifically we focus on wireless, right? And that's an area of your research, is that these are largely localized. They're largely really nerdy people that show that these attacks can happen, right? But it's not in the context of a larger scale attack. So are there examples where there are things in the research phases today that you can foresee potentially being used in larger scale attacks?
It's difficult to predict because it's difficult to know which attack is the easiest kind of to pull off at the end of the day. So we are looking at the different ones, and the attacks that may look currently quite theoretical or not a major concern may become a larger concern in the future. And we have seen this regularly in wireless comms. So, for instance, the basic security protocol for Wi-Fi, WEP, was at first considered secure, then came a first attack, and the first attack seemed theoretical, and that as we moved along, then WEP became completely broken. And so sometimes if you can show some vulnerability, even though it's really completely theoretical at the beginning, or just a very basic prototype or proof of concept, then more determined attackers may be able to exploit that further.
Right. One of the things we talked about were these cascading effects that could create communication outages. And we definitely saw aspects of this at 9/11 when the communications infrastructure went down. We fast forward to now, 18 years later, and we think about aspects of this. We're very dependent on wireless communication, whether it's our phones or wireless in our homes. And an attack that takes down wireless potentially has a really big impact to our communication infrastructure for an organization or even as a nation, right? So what are some of those things we have to start thinking about to help prepare or mitigate these types of attacks in the future?
So first, you are perfectly right. So we are increasingly dependent on our wireless communication infrastructure for our daily lives, both personal and business, professional. And one could argue that smartphones have become safety critical, and we are now starting to rely on IoT devices, medical devices of various kinds that are all also wireless, connected insulin pumps and the like. So this is becoming indeed a major area. And so I think the first things we need to be aware of is to have some backup plan, meaning if this link fails, so what else is available? So, we kind of say, wireless is so much more convenient than wired infrastructure, but we still need that infrastructure as a backup. And that's part of the business decision, who is going to pay the cost to maintain that wire infrastructure, even if it's kind of used mostly for emergency and not only, on a daily basis, it may be less useful. Think about the fact that most people, certainly millennials, they don't have any more landlines, in their homes. Mm. Even if you have a landline in your home, sometimes it's you are connected to the grid. The grid goes down, you cannot call as well. All of these things need to be considered, taking it into consideration, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially to get us through like the gap, right? I mean, we're talking about 802.11ax to kind of help position us in a position of strength with wireless, but we're going to have so much legacy gear out there, right? And what are those mitigating controls that we can have until we can get ourselves transitioned over to the more secure wireless?
Yes, and a major issue with wireless, and as you transition, you typically need also this backward compatibility with the legacy. And sometimes this is used and abused by attackers, taking advantage of the earlier protocols. So this is called downgrade attacks, and that has been done frequently. One of the most famous one, obviously, is your LTE network is much more secure, but then you downgrade that to say a 2G GSM type of, which can be easily compromised. And so there have been this fake access point that force your phone to downgrade, things like that. So maintaining the backward compatibility, yet keeping the standard of security as high as is also a challenge.
So I think, with the concept of landlines and always having dial tone, that means I need my dial-up modem to be able to back up my network connection.
Yes. I'm not sure if everyone needs that, but somewhere, some people will really need that. Again, at the infrastructure level, at the city level, if you have the smart cities, you cannot entirely rely on this wireless link that is so fragile.
Exactly. So, David, you also have done a lot of research into software-defined radios and a way to start to think about IoT, whether they have IP addresses or don't have IP addresses. What does the communication mechanism look like for this concept of IoT, right? We see it in both the industrial side and the commercial side. Talk about some of the research with software-defined radios.
Software-defined radio is a very exciting emerging technology. Actually, it's a technology that existed already for a decade, but has become much more affordable and powerful. And so this is extremely interesting and maybe a little bit scary as well, in the sense that it brings now military-like capabilities to the community, to everyone. So we need to be aware of what type of attacks can be launched by the bad guys using those devices, and at the same time see what can we do to improve security. So these are the kind of things we are doing. So, I have a few, behind me, you see a few of these radios. Essentially what they do is that these are universal radios, so they can implement your FM radio, a cell phone, a Wi-Fi, a variety of IoT devices, Bluetooth, Zigbee, and the like, because they are programmable. So you use the same hardware chip, the same RF communication card, and you can implement all of those things. And so that means you can now receive a lot, using the same card, you can receive a lot of different signals, and then you can try, for instance, to reverse engineer them, or say, again, if someone has malicious intent, could jam it or try to replay or spoof messages. All of those things are now made possible with software-defined radio. On the more constructive side of things, what we are using now lately, the software-defined radios in our research, is in order to fingerprint and enumerate what we could do device enumeration of devices that do not have an IP address, non-IP addressable. So currently, a lot of IoT devices, that Bluetooth, Zigbee, all of those do not have an IP address. And so you cannot run, say, your standard Nmap tool in order just to enumerate, which are these devices, what are they doing on my network and the like. So you don't know what's going on. You don't know what is in your business or at home. And so we are using the software-defined radio in order to perform such enumeration and penetration testing of devices. And the idea is that because the software radio can implement a lot of different IoT protocols, like, as I said, Zigbee, Bluetooth, LoRa, and others, you can switch easily between them. And then you can capture information that they transmit at the physical layer, just raw signals, or you can try to decode some of this information, and that allows you to fingerprint the devices as well as authenticate them. So that's what we are doing. We have developed a tool called Snout that we presented at a conference, the ACM CCS conference recently, and recently BU also has given us some seed funding, maybe trying to make a venture out of this.
So, David, this would be a device that I place in proximity of my other devices that will give me visibility into non-IP based protocols in an effort to fingerprint what I have, but also perhaps detect some kind of malicious behavior of some type.
Perfectly right. Yes. So, exactly, you nailed it. So you can identify the device, make sure that these are known and there's no rogue or fake devices, and also you can try to look at, again, at the very low level, whether the signal analysis makes sense to you and appears appropriate. And so you can think about a lot of these attacks where you use IoT device as botnet, that if you could capture the signals, what's going on, even the doing a spectrum analysis of the electromagnetic spectrum, you realize that it's much busier than usual. Something wrong is going on. So it's going to give you much more visibility to your network.
Do the majority of attacks in this type of wireless communications require that the attacker place a physical device on site or in proximity?
There may be some, but not necessarily. I mean, a lot of attacks are remote. So there are a lot of different possible attacks.
Yeah,
but I've heard now that, say, people can come bring or use a drone.
Right. No, it's a great point. A drone is a great use case. What I also fear too is, as the devices we're implementing become more advanced, so it has these chipsets in it. Remotely, if I can compromise a thermostat, remotely if I can compromise a Google Home device, lo and behold, chipsets on those devices have NFC and Bluetooth and Zigbee on them. Now I can gain a foothold and then use that device. Like for a long time, we looked at research from Nest. Nest had a Zigbee chipset. It wasn't used in their implementation, but that was, it never really, never saw that particular avenue kind of pan out. But I'm concerned moving in the future as it becomes more popular.
I mean, even for industry, right? I mean, when Logitech had that vulnerability in their Bluetooth keyboards, right? as an organization that has 1,500 people, we're saying, how the hell are we going to identify, folks, out of 1,500 people who has this vulnerability with a keyboard sitting on their desk, right? So I'm looking at tools like this that could potentially help us as an organization identify much better.
Yeah, that's right. And I think SDR, I'm not saying it's the only possible approach, but it's an interesting new approach for looking at that. Again, because it gives you access to really the lowest level, namely the raw signal that is transmitted over the air. But obviously, you can do much more than that. There are libraries to decode various types of packets and do more advanced. You can do higher level processing of the information.
I think one of the other challenges here with IoT is that a lot of these vendors are not interoperable. So even if a vendor came out with some tools to better monitor the environment, they don't operate with some of these other devices. And so I know some of the manufacturers are working on some commonality for creating the ability to work together, interdependency, interaction with other devices. What is it, connected home over IP or something like that, David?
Yes, that's perfectly right. So Amazon, Apple, and Google came together to come up with this new standard that will make, and the Zigbee Alliance as well, to make these devices more interoperable. We have to see how this is going to emerge. And this is also only targeted at the home, currently smart home devices. There is a lot going on in industrial IoT as well. It's not clear whether this will address these concerns. IoT is a very large field, as I mentioned, medical as well. So even if we address that, we still have a lot of legacy devices. It's probably not going to solve everything. Some devices are extremely limited in terms of capabilities. They try to save really the battery to the best extent possible. So it's a challenge that's probably to be ongoing.
Well, it's interesting. The interoperability can also be used against us. As more devices are able to talk to each other, it opens up a larger attack surface.
Yes, that's a point I've seen elsewhere sometimes. Yes, making things, having the networks, better, more connected, also raise the attack surface. That's right. But on the other hand, it's currently a security, assessment of these devices is very hard due to the lack of any standards of addressability of those devices. That's a major problem.
Well, and it comes down to an issue of trust. And at the end of the day, something has to trust the control systems that are, controlling those devices. In other words, if there's an ICS system, like a historian or whatever those types of systems, other management interfaces that talk out to the PLCs that are controlling physical systems, right? The PLC has to, at some point, trust that other system. And if you don't necessarily have to attack those embedded devices directly, as long as you can get on the control system, you can send it commands and it already trusts it. So like layer 2 authentication, it's already done, right? And it works similar way in the wireless realm as well.
So it's indeed, many of these devices currently are controlled by a gateway of some sort. And if you can compromise the gateway, you'll get access to those devices to a large extent. So that's one of the worries. And again, being able to see communication at the lowest level, capturing traffic, I think is essential. And here, I mean, you see the electromagnetic spectrum activity, and this can allow you to detect some, unusual activity going on in your network.
Yeah, we think of air gapped, right? But now we literally have to secure the air, right?
Yeah.
We've always have.
Yeah, and that was part of my point is microsegmentation in this doesn't really work, right? You can maybe microsegment the IP side of the network, but with broad spectrum radio frequencies out there, you can't microsegment that stuff.
Really thick lead walls, maybe? Well, and in higher security environments, we laugh, but that literally is the case, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you air gap them or...
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of opportunities in this area. Another one we found out very interesting when using these SDRs. We found out that we think these devices are commodity, like a Wi-Fi card, an Zigbee card, but what we found out is that their behavior, their performance widely differs. And now with this SDR, we can really test them. So we can really much more easily find out, what's their range, how far does the signal go. I mean, it's surprising. I mean, when you buy a smartphone, typically there are a lot of research report that tell you, how good is the camera on your phone, make a comparison between all the phones. But did you ever think about if you buy a phone to test, how good is your Wi-Fi card or LTE card? You think that they're all the same, but they are not.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing we can do now with these SDRs. We can test those much better than ever before.
So what you really want is really crappy wireless chipsets so that the signal doesn't travel as far. Poor implementations.
Yeah, for security maybe.
Right.
Yes, that's fine. Sometimes things that can be used as a feature, maybe a security vulnerability at the same time. So yes, there is advantage. That's the advantage of containment. Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Same with Bluetooth. Yeah.
I'll say from my perspective, that's probably one of the biggest fears as a CISO within an organization is these commercial IoT devices coming into the business.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, most of the design today is commercial grade. It's not going to be. I mean, it's going to. Consumer grade. It's not going to be commercial grade where I have that level of trust and good feeling in the security around it. But my end users on a daily basis want to bring these devices and want to bring, have everything connected to our corporate network, which it scares me, right? I mean, at the end of the day.
Well, and the interesting thing too is, I like, on one hand, I really like these more connected IoT type systems because they offer me better monitoring, right? When I look at, because I'm a nerd, my HVAC system at home and it has a circuit board and I research it, really the only output that I have at home is a tiny, tiny little LCD screen, right? That's all I have. That both is my input for the device and gives me all of my output. If I want to monitor that in some way, I have to connect it to something. And if you want to be more aware and have more visibility into what's happening in your physical space with those environments, David, I think this is where your research is very important, right? These devices more and more want to provide that telemetry remotely, which has a huge benefit for security monitoring, which is ironic, but also on the other side opens up all of these vulnerabilities because now I don't need to be physically standing in your control room to get output or put input into a critical system.
But again, it's being able to bubble the most important data to the top because we're already inundated, right?
Yeah.
Our SOC analysts are already getting data from every angle possible. Now it's about how do you intelligently bubble the important stuff to the top and not create more noise.
Better correlation.
At the end of the day, if you're getting more noise, our teams aren't going to be more productive.
Right. And it's also a good correlation point for your other data points. But David, right, all of these devices are moving towards that legacy kind of little LCD screen over to connecting this with the benefit of security, but also carrying with it that risk.
Yes, this is perfectly right. These are double-edged swords. So you can do good thing with them, you can do bad thing with them. So it goes in both directions. Definitely, there's a lot of benefits in terms of inventory management, anomaly detection, as you say.
And some
I think as we deploy the systems, we need to check you use them for monitoring, but you need to monitor that the systems are reportedly, behaving properly as well.
Right.
That we cannot trust them that they will behave properly and they'll be still secure themselves. We have to look at that as well.
It was interesting in industrial control systems. Some of the analysts that are far closer to the space than I kind of have this fear that because our technology here in the U.S., especially with industrial control systems, is a lot more automated and connected and uses technology, that we're not prepared for a disaster in the physical sense. In other words, they compared it to the blackouts in the Ukraine, and they said, well, they had fleets of trucks, and they were kind of used to supporting this older legacy technology that was not as connected, so they could physically drive somewhere. They knew where to drive. They knew what building and door to go in, and they knew what to do when they got in the control room and had enough vehicles, in other words, to go do that. Here in the U.S., we rely on a very hyper-connected system that gives us all of that, remotely, and we're not as prepared in terms of if there is a huge outage or issue to have that physical fleet, which I thought was kind of scary, actually.
Well, I think that's David's point, right? Having that resilience plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but the plan needs to be in there, and obviously that should be a dialogue between government and industry. I mean, you want a very light touch of regulation. You don't want to have another layer of bureaucracy. But on the other hand, everyone needs to understand that, again, we can have these cascading attacks. One domino piece falls, that can lead other domino pieces to fall as well.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, David, you mentioned the maintenance of those backup systems, right? I can see that being outsourced, right, from a power company, for example. Mm-hmm. I know that in an outage of a certain size, I'm going to need X number of additional trucks, right? And I'm contracted with a company, or there's a government program, right, that can provide that assistance, that's trained, that they do practices and exercises. And that's the thing about having these backup plans, is making sure that you're actually testing them.
Yeah.
Yes, and some countries are moving there. I mean, some countries, I've read in the UK, in Finland, trying to do some certification of IoT devices. I mean, it's just a start, but they are trying to go into that direction, to have better guidelines for the customers as well. And that, I think, is the way to go.
Yeah. And David, I'm curious. I mean, we all walk around and we have all these IoT devices, the consumer grade IoT devices on our bodies and everywhere we go, right? And my fear is the privacy side now, right? As we get more and more connected. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know my watch tells me my heart rate when I'm working out, right? And it's connected to Google Fit, and it's basically telling me my sleep patterns. Yeah. My fear is if that gets co-opted and you can use that to profile people, steal their private information, their personal information, right? I mean, what have you seen in that space? I mean, the more connected we get, the more privacy, more private information could get stolen.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we and other groups of researchers have done research on Bluetooth and Bluetooth privacy. We have looked at whether they implement properly what we call the MAC address randomization, meaning they are supposed to regularly change their addresses so that it makes it harder to track devices, because what they do, they send what they call these beacons every second. And if they don't change the addresses that appearing in the beacon, then you can easily identify, this is the same person doing this specific action. And so we looked at this and implementation, even some of the most advanced devices, iOS, macOS, Windows 10, and we found out that it's very hard to implement this properly. And what we found out is that even though they implement MAC address randomization, you can use some other contents of the beacons that do not change as the address changes, and we can use these others as anchors for still track the users.
Yeah,
so because they do not change in sync, they do not change at the same time. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what they are for. I mean, these are other attributes, other fields in those beacons. We can use them as well to track the users, and that's what we did. Mm. And that shows how challenging it is to implement this properly. And so that was just in order to track users, devices, their location. But obviously, you can also do some what's called like traffic analysis. So even though you don't know what exactly is the information, just by looking at the pattern of the signal, you may also infer some information. Some other cases, lately, some other researchers, they have shown that the handoff protocol by Apple has some significant privacy issues. They were able to reverse engineer. So we found out that a little bit in our work as well. We found out that if you click on a website and you have two devices that have Mac OS, so they then suddenly you see a Bluetooth message being sent out. So this is already some side information, but then other people have completely reverse engineered the protocol. No. Be able to everything, exactly what you said. You can get a lot of information.
Wow. With the MAC address randomization on Android, I had to turn that off because it was breaking a protocol that I needed to use to configure another IoT device.
Wow.
Beautiful.
So you had to make the Android less secure.
I had to pin it to my actual MAC address in order for and I had to actually remove a security feature from my wireless network in order to get some functionality working for things in my network. Now, if I'm experiencing that, certainly others are experiencing that as well. And going in and turning off the randomization feature because it's breaking things. If you think about how networking and protocols work, that could definitely have the potential to break something, and turns out it does.
That's definitely one of the reasons why we found also that some devices, at least at the time, the Fitbit will not implement at all their MAC address randomization because exactly for what the purpose, usability.
Right.
And usability with older devices and things like that, so they decide not to implement and they take the risk of the trade-off. But that's one of the issues. Yes. The more you want to implement those privacy preserving features, the harder make your device usable.
Yep, the age-old question, usability versus security, and we don't need to make Androids less secure. David, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security
Weekly. Thank you so much for letting me in.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, David. There are a lot of resources posted in the show notes, so if anybody wants to get some more information about what we talked about, go to the wiki and get the show notes. With that, we'll take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.